My kid is having a tantrum, I will literally hand her an object and say, can I have it? While she's crying, and then take it back. Hand it to her, can I have that back? And then all of a sudden we're passing this back and forth. The activity becomes the focus and she calms down. And music has the ability to do the same thing. It's this voluntary action.
Kristen Bell and Jackie Tohn, welcome to the Motherly Podcast.
We love the Motherly.
And welcome back to you, Kristen. We actually recorded the first episode. This is your second time on the Motherly Podcast. So we recorded the first episode. I went back and checked. February 21st, 2020. Right before. Woo! Yeah. We had no idea.
We didn't know.
It was I feel like, was that in New York?
It was in New York City, and we just didn't know what was about to happen. So I want to talk about maybe a bit about what we have learned since we talked last, what we've gone through, and certainly what we've learned about our communities through all of that. And Jackie, thank you also for being here. So I know that you two are real life best friends, which is so cool. And you're working on this new show together. So tell our listeners, where did the idea of this new show, Do Re Mi, come from? I read, Jackie, that it was your idea. Can you talk a little bit about its inception and
Sure.
how it came to life?
So one of my close friends, Mike Scharf, came to me in like 2014. And I was already a songwriter and making music for other artists and stuff. And he was like, we need to make a show that sort of focuses on music education. I want you to write the songs. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it. So he and I just then created Do Re and Mi, which basically the impetus from the very beginning was we were noticing that our nieces and nephews, the music and arts education budgets in their schools were being completely cut. And, you know, this sounds soundbitey, but I wouldn't be the person I am today without music. I wouldn't be a human without music. It's just been my entire life. My dad's a musician, and kids weren't being able to learn music in school. And a lot of them obviously didn't have access to it at home. And so it was basically our mission from the very beginning to put music and sneak music education into kids' lives, hands, brains, all of it.
And Jackie and Mike came over to my house one day, wanting me to be no part of it. That wasn't the intention. They wanted to test it on my kids, and they were like, "Can we talk to your kids for a second?" And they were like, "Do you guys respond to these images? Do you guys like these songs?" And I was like, "Well, what's this stuff?" And they were like, "We have this idea, but we don't really know what to do with it." And I'm like, "I know what to do with it. I know who to call." And we hooked up with this amazing production company, Gaumont, who has been just such a great shepherd of this project, took it to Amazon. And taking it to Amazon was one of the best things we ever did because, as Jackie said, the goal is to get music education in front of kids, obviously with the trickiness of pretending like it's an entertainment show, which of course it's an entertainment show. But, you know, I have two little girls. I like Jackie, again, not a soundbite, would not have discovered acting had I not discovered music first. Mm-hmm. Like I was singing opera and then discovered musical theater and then regular theater and then started auditioning. I would not have this career if I hadn't fallen in love with music at such a young age. My girls are very musical. They do musicals at our local theater. It's really important, and there's so much science and data to support that it helps kids, their brains grow with math, with social skills. It literally can change your neuroplasticity. Like, you can put music of their favorite genre or time frame on in an Alzheimer's ward, and they will come back online for a couple minutes. I mean, it's crazy. It can change our mood. Mm-hmm. It is something that we all have access to, but we don't utilize. And going with Amazon and developing this show in such a broad umbrella is not just creating a great show that kids will watch, but these like toys that I literally, my kid almost did not let me put this in the shot because she opened the box before I did. These aren't even out yet. But there's apps that you're going to feel good if you have to hand your tablet or your phone to your child. It's like that feeling where when I find like a puzzle game where I know they're having to spell, but they're playing a game on my phone, I'm like, yeah. I nailed momming today. But this is going to be the same thing. You know, music can bind a lot of families together. It can bind friendships together. And, you know, Jackie plays music with her dad all the time, and they send me videos when she's home. And I love it so much. And the kids will be able to use the apps and make music with themselves, with their friends. Their brains will be growing. And it's just a show that you can feel really good about. We want to get it in front of as many kids as possible, because I don't like the fact that some kids won't have exposure to music. Their brains deserve to grow just as much as everyone else's.
Yeah, we're sneak teaching. We coined a term. I think I may have just made it up just now. And
I'm writing it down. Sneak teaching. I love it.
We're sneak teaching. So
I love it.
What are lyrics?
So, you know, Jackie, you brought up something that actually I was going to ask exactly about, which is the fact that somehow music makes us feel more human. I actually had an experience about that this morning. Not even thinking about this podcast
Every day.
Well, of course. And I took my daughter out to breakfast this morning, and I was feeling nervous and I was feeling tense in part. I was interviewing some big Hollywood ladies today.
I have a big deal.
You are. And I had a busy week at work, and I felt that tension rising. So I'm sitting with my daughter, and I just did a little 30-second meditation so I could be present and enjoy the moment with her. And then a song came on the radio, and I started singing it and swaying. And my daughter said, "Mommy, I thought you were meditating. What are you doing now?" Because I literally was like kind of moving with the music. And I told her, you know, I was meditating, but then a song came on and I started dancing to it because it helps me to feel centered, to sometimes sing along with the music. And it struck me that there is something about participating in rhythms and singing and dancing and swaying that is human. And I want to teach that to our children too.
I have so many things to say about this. How much time do we have?
Okay. As much as you want.
There's this I love psychology books, like anything on brain development. And there's an amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score, where the doctor that wrote it treats a lot of PTSD patients. He was like the one that got PTSD in the DSM, it to be recognized. And one of the things he finds mandatory is not only treating people with talk therapy who have PTSD problems, he also mandates that they join some sort of physical voluntary group activity. So sometimes that's a yoga class, sometimes that's a drum circle, sometimes that's a chorus, sometimes, it's a dance class. It can be anything, but there is, and also Oprah just wrote a book about this, regulating. There are ways to regulate our bodies that we don't ever tap into. And I've, like, after reading What Happened to You, understanding that you can regulate your body by, like, literally you're voluntarily giving something and receiving something. Well, that's music, right? Mm-hmm. But also you can do it with a kickball. If my kid is having a tantrum, I will literally hand her an object and say, "Can I have it?" while she's crying, and then take it back. Mm-hmm. Hand it to her. "Can I have that back?" And then all of a sudden we're passing this back and forth. The activity becomes the focus and she calms down. And music has the ability to do the same thing. It's this voluntary action. And I think Americans listen to it just when they're in the car, but there's so many other cultures that have this voluntary communication. Like in other countries, you do capoeira or you do tai chi, and there's like community activities. And I think music is something we're kind of resting like on. We're really passing it by. It has the ability to do so much good.
Yes. And I kind of just knew that intuitively today and felt better by doing it.
Well, that's the thing, Liz, that, sorry to interrupt you, but it's like, that's the thing about it being intuitive, right? Because again, soundbite city, and I get insecure about that, but it's like, it is universal, right? You don't even have a choice. Like the other day, someone told me it's some classical song I was listening. Oh, you know what it was? I was in my first Uber since the pandemic. Yes. Okay. Scared. But the guy was listening to classical music. And I was like, I have been sleeping on classical music. Of course I've been listening to it my whole life, but in the last few years I haven't. Mm-hmm. So I put it on, completely changed my brain chemistry. I was like walking differently around the house. I wasn't as stressed when I was like going to get something to eat. I found myself more calmly being able to decide what to eat. And it was like, I talk about sneak teach. I was being like sneak taught to calm down by listening to classical music involuntarily. I don't know if that made any sense out loud.
No, we got it. We got it. And yet, and I think so many of us know that these things are true because we've experienced them, but
also the science
and the science, and there is more and more science that is proving what we've known to be true. But in some ways, some of these things have been forgotten, and often our culture doesn't value them. Like we know, Jackie, I believe you mentioned it, that music education is one of the first programs that gets cut with budgets. So why do you think that it's so important to really generate this love of music and what it teaches us, and how it helps us from a young age?
You gotta have people screaming it from the rooftops if they know there's a solution. And by the way, I'll listen to any solution that is screamed from any rooftop. You know, if it's worked for someone, I want to know about it. It's kind of how I accomplish parenting. I'm like, I don't get insecure if women are like, don't give me advice. I'm like, I want every piece of advice, all of it. I want to know how you sleep taught your kid. I want to know how you get them to eat vegetables. I want to know all of it because something might work for me. Mm-hmm. Music has this way of, yes, like Jackie, you said, being universal. It kind of does work for everyone. And there's so many different types of music. And that was one thing that was really important with the show, was to represent that. Like, kids seem to love music because they innately know it makes them feel differently. Mm-hmm. And there are so many different types of music that, especially when you're creating, I mean, we've got some young creators on our hands, these kids that might not get the opportunity to do it because they don't have the education. But there are 52 different songs in this show that represent reggae and pop and country and blues and jazz and, like 80s Olivia Newton-John, my personal fave. And it's just important for kids to know the value of how each of those makes you feel and can make you feel. We're in like a deregulated state in the world right now, and we all need to learn how to regulate a little more. In fact, I just did that yesterday with my kids. We always talk about your toolbox mm-hmm. and what you can do to help yourself. And like, my kids are panicking. I'm like, what tool do you want to use? Look in your toolbox. And it's always been a metaphor. And the other day, my 6-year-old was like, wouldn't it be great if we had a real toolbox and then we could just go inside it? So obviously I immediately ordered too many toolboxes, but the buy-in was that I ordered a bunch of stickers that they could decorate it. So I'm like, this is your toolbox. And then I wrote out 100 different regulation tools. One of which, like, it was like, take a deep breath, take a 5-minute walk, find an adult and ask for help. One of them was find a song you love and sing out loud. And they've used it. Like, it's mm-hmm. helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get an extra toolbox?
I can get you a toolbox.
Okay. This feels right, because every single thing you said, I was like, I need to help with my own regulating, and I need to be reminded to take a deep breath. And that's what's so exciting about this show, just to sort of circle back. Not only are the lessons we're teaching for everyone, but every episode has a musical genre, a musical lesson, and an emotional lesson.
Yes.
And so there really is so much to learn. And I mean, we tried to make a show where the music is it's not just for preschoolers. If you have kids of any age, they'll love this music. And the hope, of course, is that so will grown-ups. And this is a show that will make parents want to put their tablet in the microwave.
Correct.
Thank you.
Another big theme within the show, of course, is friendship. And I mean, how many times in history have two really best friends also starred in a show? Like, this is a really unique moment to explore together. And I think especially now, right? I think we've lived through a pandemic where our people were torn away from us, to protect one another. Kristen, I guess I'm wondering what your village has meant to you in motherhood, and what have you learned about it and your village through this experience the last year and a half?
I mean, well, first of all, survival is not an option without a village. Mm. We pretended like it was for so many years because we have our phones and we hop and bop all around the city and we all have different jobs. And then you get together with your friends and you get, infused with that energy, and that fills your cup up for the next couple weeks if you don't see them. But the reality of everything shutting down, I mean, we, with kids, we had to have a pod, and thankfully we're also able to see Jackie. And it's like you had to pick and choose the highest people on your priority list. And by doing that, you had to educate yourself on what your friends mean to you and do for you and what you do for them. So you had to actually analyze the value of the friendship from a very like evolutionary, like herd animal standpoint, right? Like we are herd animals. We're not sloths, for lack of a better example. We don't live solitarily. We live in groups, and it's for a reason. We need to rely on each other. And over the pandemic, having your herd or your pod was, I think, an education emotionally for all of us. And it's funny because we make a whole bunch of jokes now of like, I don't need to see anybody else other than these, you know, people who we've gotten through the pandemic with. Like they make the whole world go round for me. And like, sure, I'll have jobs and stuff, but like the investment in people I'll rely on is going to be this group.
Jackie, do you have anything to add? I know.
Do I ever? I mean, it's like you can't. Here's the thing about interviews: you can't ask Kristen first, because then what am I going to even say? It's just I always go like, yeah, and then I just point and then hope that her Zoom box is the right direction of where I'm pointing. You know, she nails it, and it's exactly right. I think, you know, we do. It's been a really weirdly, sadly solitary time for a lot of us. And if we don't have our communities in these times, I mean, normally ever, if you don't have your community ever in your life, it's awful. But then especially now, and for this show to be happening right now, when I think kids have been alone a lot, and they're going to get to see, I've children, they're going to get to see these three bird buddies on their journey together and how much friendship means. And not to, you know, sort of tout the apps and the musical instruments and the toys right now, but to be able to have this show that you're watching be in your living room and teaching you about togetherness and friendship and all these emotional lessons as well as musical lessons, and to be able to do that at home and hopefully soon with friends, right? I mean, kids are going back to school right now, and it's wild. I know, dude. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, just a big lesson on the show, which has never been more important in the world. I mean, it is every day, but is togetherness. Mm-hmm. And we're shining such a light on the world just being how it is right now, in and of itself is shining a light on the importance of togetherness, right? Like you don't realize it any more deeply than when you don't have it and you can't have it.
And we also have recognized how interdependent we are on one another for individual everything. Health and safety, right? I mean, it's such a metaphor for all of that. I know I actually moved during the pandemic, and I feel like I have to start over with building those friendships. So I can't wait till
you changed states.
I moved an hour away. So
yeah, that's a hike, bud. Yeah. I mean, I moved close, but still it's weird.
It is. I guess in part because I'm going through a season of knowing that I need to reinvest in building and cultivating those friendships myself as a mom of 4. Kristen, as a busy working mom, have you ever gone through seasons when you didn't prioritize your friendships? And what did that teach you if you've been there?
Oh yeah. Well, it taught me what feeling permanently tapped out would feel like. That's the reality. Like I have a tendency to overwork myself because I get really excited about a lot of different projects. And as an actor or a producer, you know, the reality is you're an independent contractor. So you're working for a lot of different places, and it's a lot of busy work. It's a lot of organizational work beyond just like acting. And when I am not prioritizing taking the time to vent with my girlfriends or even have like a date night with my husband, like my inner world crumbles. And I'm like, why am I so depressed? Oh yeah, because I haven't let myself be a human. Like I haven't lifted that pressure. And your friends have the ability to do that. And then once you do invest in that, then you have this lifeline of like, when I'm prioritizing my friends, there's the sort of emotional capital that I can call anyone and be like, I have to run out for 30 minutes. Can someone come over? Or can you take my kids? Or, hey, I have the whole day off. Can I take your kids? Do you need to get something done? Like there's the village aspect that really fills in all the blanks, and you just can't quantify how important it is.
Mm-hmm. I know. And it lasts, right? So like the other day, me and some girlfriends just went to like sit at a restaurant at 8:45 at night. And it was like novel. I hadn't left my driveway when the sun was down in as long as I could remember. And we were laughing and just having such a great night. And I woke up the next morning. I had no anxiety. I just like felt so good for the days following, because when you get filled up in that way, it lasts. It's not just a momentary thing. And I think, I mean, not to circle it back to the show too hard, but I think it's similar with the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, it really makes you feel good. And it sneak teaches, but it makes you feel good. And we're hoping that, you know, that those feelings that you get while watching it, they carry you through a little bit, these gnarly times.
Well, to both of you, I know you've been friends for 15 years. I'm sure friendship has evolved. You've gone through all types of life. I mean, Jackie, you've watched Kristen become a mom as well. I guess I'm wondering, what have you learned by being a witness and a friend to all of this? How has it shaped who you are today?
Kind of made me cry in the pod, Kennedy.
I'm doing
What's your angle, bro?
Look, it's Oprah vibes. If you want to cry, you can cry.
I don't want to, but I might. I cry a lot when I talk about Kristen. She changed my life so much. You know, even before we started working together, I mean, this is just really one of the truest and deepest and longest friendships I've ever had in my life. And I will say, watching her, she always touts me on these interviews. I'm so glad I'm getting this opportunity. Watching her, it's otherworldly, right? Because it's not average or normal or even something you can wrap your brain around to know a person that is not only capable of so many actual talents and skills, but also emotionally being available to the people in her life, to her children, to her business partners, to her various jobs. And then you want to tack on top of that, how is there even a breath of room for philanthropy? But somehow, when there's not enough hours in the day, you're shooting 15 hours a day and you have 2 kids and a husband and your mom's in town, somehow there's clean water that you're helping with. And it's really amazing. Certainly on a day where I'm like, oh, how am I going to do it all? You just channel the homie and you're like, oh, well, if she can do it all, I can do like 60, 40, 20% of it. I mean, it's really inspiring. And her relationship too, right? Like, I mean, I think she's public about it not being perfect. And there's this, and the beauty in that, and the beauty in like how to have a husband and children and a career. I mean, it's not a lot of people can do it. I mean, it's interesting to be very close and be inspired by a person who everybody's inspired by. Mm-hmm. There's a little piece of you that's like, well, she's kind of like, she's like kind of mine a little, you know what I mean? There's something really fascinating about like, yeah, she inspires you too, but like, I don't know. It's beautiful. And I'm really grateful for her.
Beautifully said. I know you're also almost like an aunt to her kids.
They're my very close friends.
Yes. So what is that like? This sort of, when we talk about becoming a mother, but is there a kind of falling in love that has happened, you know, becoming an aunt that you've experienced?
Well, I have my own niece and nephews, and absolutely, but they're really far away. And, you know, and I will be honest too, like in the pandemic, I haven't seen Katie and her kids as much as I would have loved to. Part of that is, you know, I was in a relationship with someone who was very, very concerned about COVID, as was I, but I knew that they were getting tested. We were all getting tested. But, you know, in those really hard times, we have to honor everybody's comfort level. Mm-hmm. So it's been hard. It's been hard to be so separated from people, but obviously there is, and I want kids of my own one day and hopefully soon, wink, defrost those eggs I have in a freezer in Encino. We'll talk about it later. But yeah, I think there is something really special to loving your friends' kids and loving your own niece and nephews and having that relationship. Also, you know, it's cheating, right? Because they just love you. You don't have to ever come in and be like, don't eat that. You can sneak them shit they're not supposed to have. None of your business, Kristen. So it's like, you know, those things make you, I love to make music with them and be funny and silly and run around. And, you know, like that's my vibe, but I definitely, I act like a kid. So it helps with my kid friendships. That's for sure.
It's actually very much in line with what my sister taught me. She had kids before I did. And she said, hey, I have this theory that I think the parents should be the disciplinarians. And I think that the aunt and uncle should be the ones that get you crazy and out of your box. And I think the grandparents should be the wisdom givers. So my sister, when she had kids, asked me, she said, I want you to go against what I say. I want you to sneak them candy. I want you to take them on a motorcycle ride around the yard. I want you to do all those things because I think that's the purpose of you in this structure. And I was like, that's brilliant, because you don't want every adult that is around your kid to be the same. They will build zero character. So like if my kids don't like a teacher they have or don't like someone they're interacting with, I go, wow, let's talk about that, because you are going to meet people on earth that you don't like or that have a different style of communication than you. And this is a chance to practice.
And it is such a great example of what that village needs to look like, because there will be parents, but that community around can fill in so many gaps. And sneak the candy, sneak the teaching. I love sneak teaching. I'm going to use that now. I love all of that. Okay, I have 1.5 quick more questions. So we're doing a new segment for TikTok. So Kristen, quick question: what's the best parenting advice you ever got?
Whoa.
I mean, how would I even
pick? Do you have one that comes back that you remind yourself, or even in this season of parenting?
Yeah, give me a second. Sorry. Well, I'll relate it to one piece of advice I got when they were toddlers was the 1 finger rule. Toddlers want to touch everything. And that is sort of a metaphor about how they're sponging up the world. And you can't let them touch grandma's expensive vase, right? You can't let them get their hands on it. But if you're with them and present, you can let them at least experience it. So she'd say, I want to touch that, or reach out for it. And I'd say, ooh, me too. Let's do it with 1 finger. Just 1 finger. And we'd both reach out and touch the vase like that. And that was an epic piece of advice that is transferred to them growing older of how can I say yes more often? And that's actually another piece of advice. When I was doing Bad Moms, I asked Jada Pinkett Smith because she had older kids. I said, my kids are little, but what have you learned? What can I glean from you? And she said, say yes as often as you possibly can.
That is really good advice, because it's so easy to say no. And they want to touch. I have a toddler who wants to touch all the things. I love that. Thank you.
She does say yes as often as possible. And she actually had to tell me when I was going over there what not to do, because I come from a neurotic Jewish family and their kids jumping off the stairs and like falling and then like crying for a second and then getting back up and getting her little Hot Wheels. And my instinct is to be like, careful, 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 careful. And it just comes out of me like my mother. I don't mean for it to. And KB's like, hey buddy, you don't have to keep shouting careful with them. And I'm like, got it.
Well, we also had a rule that my husband made up that if it won't require a trip to the hospital, you're allowed to do it. So our child at 1.5 was balance beaming on the back of the couch because it wouldn't require a hospital visit. She would fall 2 feet and it would be fine, and there's carpet underneath.
I'm going to say onto a couch. Exactly.
Or even on the backside. How else is she going to learn about gravity and about risk assessment? Like, how else is she going to learn about that unless she's able to do it?
So I'm just over there holding my breath all the time. Don't say careful. Don't say careful.
I love it. Very wise words, Kristen Bell and Jackie Tohn. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Motherly Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you. Best of luck. This was so great. Thank you.